You see, Jesus was in the garden and he was praying. It says that he was a stone's throw away from his disciples praying. And when we get to verse 42, we hear the verbal portion of his prayer. Notice what I said, the verbal portion, not the complete of his prayer, but the verbal. The verbal gives us an idea that there were two things going on. Number one, that the flesh he lived in was fighting against the divine nature of his purpose. When he says, Father, if there's any other way for this to work, let this cup pass from me. That's the flesh talking. That is saying, I really, in this condition, do not want to go through this. Now, y'all don't want to see Jesus that way, but you need to look at it. Because remember, he was divine, but my God, he was also human. His humanity was coming out and saying there has to be another way. There must be another way. If there's any other way, I will go all the way forward and endorse it. But then it says, but. Or in another version, it might say, nevertheless. Not my will, but yours be done. That's the divine nature of his purpose, speaking out against the messed up nature of the flesh. Let me put a pin here and say there's times when you're looking at situations and your flesh gets to talking. Your flesh starts telling you all kind of things. I'm too scared. I'm not qualified. I'm not the right person for the job. I'm not that person that can do this and that. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not this. I'm not this. And I'm not this. But the divine nature of your purpose keeps on screaming at you and says, forget what your flesh is saying and trust God over yourself and watch what God will get ready to do. So Jesus is in the garden. And he's going through this, but then he says something interesting in 43. It says that an angel came to help strengthen him. Y'all missed that. An angel came to strengthen Jesus. He did not get up after that one-line prayer. No, he stayed there until something happened. He stayed until some change came. He stayed until there was a resolution to his dilemma. And when he stayed there, an angel came, and the Bible says that the angel came and strengthened him. And the next verse says, and in his anguish, he prayed so hard that sweat came down his face like blood rushing from his head. Then, after all that, he got up, went to his disciples, said, I told y'all before I went to pray. How come y'all fell asleep? He knew something was about to happen and said, pray. He told them again a second time, pray, so you don't fall into the time of temptation. Then suddenly what happens next? Here come the temple guards. Here come the high priest. And here comes Judas. And Judas comes, looks at Jesus, smiles in his face, kisses him on the cheek. And Jesus looks back and says, now is this how I'm going out? Is this what you're going to do? You're going to betray me with a kiss. But now I want you to identify within the text a little further. And you see his disciples begin to talk to Jesus. They say, Jesus, should we go ahead and draw our sword? We should let you know that the disciples were not non-violent yet. Everybody in the church ain't non-violent. That's why it's called, it's constant. It's a constant change, right? The Lord, wait, here y'all go. Y'all can take this and run with it. The Lord is still working on me.
Yes, sir.
They had their swords and they looked at Jesus and said, should we draw? But there was an impatient brother that didn't care about Jesus' response, drew a sword, cut off a man's ear. That man that did all that in another depiction was Peter. And everybody knows Peter was a hothead, had a big mouth, and was a hothead. He reacted before he went ahead and saw the whole situation. He had great revelation, but couldn't get himself under control. And Jesus is the only sane person in the whole group. You got folk trying to take him away to kill him. You have disciples that don't want him to be taken away. And Jesus said a few words. No more of this. Picked up the ear. Reattached it to the man's head. And then he makes one more declaration. He said, now all this time, day after day after day, y'all see me. You never touched me. You never came by me. You didn't do anything whatsoever. But today, this is your moment. And this is darkness's moment. Now, y'all like looking at me real strange. Y'all read the same text I read. And if you were really paying attention during the meditation, you really listened to the same description. And you looking at me like, now what in the world does any of this have to do with your title, Pastor? Well, you have to go back. Jesus was in a conflicting situation when he went to pray. And the one thing that happened was he prayed and he was sweating hard. What do we know about sweating, church? We know that there are two principles of sweating. Number one, when you sweat, it is supposed to regulate the temperature of your body. And we know, for most of us that have ever been sick, we want to sweat so it opens up our pores so whatever is in us can get out of us. Y'all still with me? Now, Jesus went down with a conflict between his flesh and his spirit. And the text says that he stayed on his knees with an angel to strengthen him, and he prayed in his anguish or in the midst of the conflict. And then after he finally finished with sweat running down his face, he got back up and walked out his purpose. Okay. So, church, as we go forward, there comes a moment in time when you have to examine yourself.
Yes.
You and I got to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, now what are we really doing right now? Are we just waiting on the Lord to just do? Or is God waiting for us to sweat out some of this flesh? Okay, y'all come on, help me. We gotta say to ourselves, are we gonna allow the flesh to dictate our lives? Or are we gonna let the Spirit lead us to the places God intends for us? Now, can you imagine what would have happened if Jesus would have got up after that one sentence prayer?
Yeah.
There might have been uncertainty within the supposed Savior, and then Jesus' death would have gone from just being somebody dying because they taught something nobody liked to being killing an innocent man who did not want to die. Jesus had to be willing to go because God will not force himself on an unwilling vessel.
Wow.
He ain't gonna force his will. That's not what God does. I'm not gonna force. Wait, I can't force you to do what you don't want to do.
Well, Lord.
That's called free will, right?
Amen.
He does not force you to do what you don't want to do. But the thing is, isn't it better to serve the Lord or to serve your flesh? When we look at all that God does for us, how he heals us, how he takes us from glory to glory, how he makes a way out of no way and all that kind of stuff, the evidence should show that all we got to worry about is serving him. And if my relationship with God is about serving him, then there's some things within me that cannot dwell